0214 hours. December the 25th, 2020, Zulia State, Venezuela. While the rest of the world was hours into Christmas morning, a warehouse complex on the western edge of Lake Maracaibo was generating the kind of thermal signature that analysts at Langley had been cataloging for months. Drug processing infrastructure, submarine fabrication equipment, chemical precursor storage, nearly $1 billion in cartel logistics capacity concentrated in a single facility operated under the protection of the Venezuelan state, insulated by a layered Russian-supplied air defense network that the Maduro government had been publicly describing as impenetrable to Western air power. At 0214 hours and some seconds, that description became factually incorrect. Two small objects detached from an aircraft that no radar in Venezuela had detected entering the country's airspace. The objects fell. There was no large explosion, no city-shaking detonation, no visible aircraft overhead. What followed was a chemical chain reaction as the precision strike ignited the facility's own stored materials. A green and purple fireball, characteristic of burning industrial chemicals. The color of hundreds of millions of dollars in cartel infrastructure becoming particulate matter in a time frame measured in seconds. The S-300VM air defense system, the most advanced Russian export surface-to-air missile network deployed in South America, had not fired a single round. It had not acquired a single valid target. It had spent the preceding 20 minutes pointing its radar arrays and missile batteries in entirely the wrong direction, hunting electronic ghosts, while the actual attack came and went without producing a return on any Venezuelan sensor. To understand how that happened, you have to start 2 hours earlier and several hundred miles to the northeast. The aircraft that carried out the strike is designated the RQ-180. It does not appear in any official U.S. Air Force procurement document. Its operational history is classified. What is known from observational data and engineering analysis is its basic architecture, a tailless flying wing configuration which eliminates the vertical stabilizers that produce the largest radar cross-section components on a conventional aircraft. The entire outer surface is coated with radar-absorbent material. There are no protruding engine inlets in a conventional sense. The intake geometry is blended into the upper wing surface to prevent radar energy from reaching and reflecting off the engine compressor faces. The design intent is not to reduce radar detectability. The design intent is to eliminate it at the frequencies that ground-based air defense radars operate on. But the RQ-180's approach to Zulia was not dependent on stealth geometry alone. The aircraft descended to approximately 15 feet above the sea surface and held that altitude across the entire maritime approach to the Venezuelan coast. 15 feet above the waterline is not a comfortable operating altitude for a billion-dollar classified asset. It is a specific tactical choice based on a specific physical principle. Ground-based radar systems that scan for incoming aircraft must deal with a constant problem. The ocean surface is not flat and still. Waves, whitecaps, and surface chop all generate radar returns. The collective noise from ocean surface motion in a radar's coverage area is called sea clutter, and it fills the display with thousands of small, irregular, moving blips that software and operators must filter out to find actual airborne contacts. A fixed-wing aircraft traveling at 15 feet above the sea surface produces a radar cross-section, that is, in terms of size, altitude behavior, and return characteristics, very similar to sea clutter at that range. The RQ-180 was not invisible. It was indistinguishable from wave noise on the Venezuelan radar operators' displays, one of thousands of small surface-level returns in a picture where legitimate airborne contacts register at altitude and behave like aircraft. No active emissions from the drone, no radar altimeter which would broadcast its own signal, no radio communications. Navigation running entirely on inertial reference and preloaded terrain data, the same position-keeping method a submarine uses when it cannot access GPS. Dead reckoning updated against known environmental parameters. The aircraft knew where it was going before it left the ground, and it did not need to ask anyone for directions during the transit. At 0200 hours, 14 minutes before the attack window, the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft operating from the USS Gerald R. Ford, holding position 100 to 120 nautical miles offshore, began their part of the operation. The Growler is an FA-18F airframe rebuilt for electronic attack. Its AN/ALQ-218 receivers and AN/ALQ-99 jamming pods give it the ability to not just suppress an adversary's radar, but to synthesize false targets within it, feeding the radar's own processing architecture a manufactured picture of multiple inbound aircraft. The system does not jam the radar into blindness. It feeds it a coherent, believable lie. What appeared on the S-300VM's tracking displays at 0200 hours was a formation of 20 contacts bearing southwest outside engagement range, closing at speeds consistent with FA-18 attack profiles. The geometry, the speed, the altitude, the radar cross-section values, all of it consistent with a coordinated strike package inbound from the direction of the carrier group. The S-300VM battery crews executed exactly the response their training demanded. Systems to full activation, radar arrays slewed to the threat bearing, missile launchers oriented to intercept geometry. The entire integrated air defense network that had been protecting the Zulia facility pivoted its attention to the south, toward 20 aircraft that did not exist. Two Su-30 Mk-2 fighters scrambled from the nearest operating base and vectored toward the Ghost Formation. The RQ-180, 15 feet above the water on the opposite bearing, crossed the unmonitored coastline while the air defense system that was supposed to stop it was looking the other direction. The Growlers held the spoofed picture for long enough. Then they shut down transmitters and turned back toward the ford. The Su-30 pilots arrived at the coordinates the formation should have occupied and found empty sky. The squadron commander processed the situation in the seconds it takes an experienced combat pilot to recognize a deception operation. He ordered his radar off. The AN/APG-81 equivalent in the Su-30's nose was already being exploited by the Growler's jamming architecture, and switching to passive removed that vulnerability. He activated the OLS-30 infrared search and track system instead. The IRST does not emit. It does not broadcast. It searches passively for heat. The RQ-180's airframe, regardless of its radar signature, generates friction heating from supersonic airflow and thermal output from its engines. An IRST sensor looking in the right part of the sky with the right sensitivity settings at the right angle relative to the exhaust plume can acquire a contact that radar cannot see. The Su-30SS turned toward Zulia in passive hunt mode. They were looking for a thermal contact in the night sky, and they were covering the distance fast. This was the race that determined the outcome. Above the target complex, the RQ-180 had opened its ventral sensor bay. The long-wave infrared sensor array scanned the warehouse roof, not the surface, through it. Modern LWIR at the resolution. This class of sensor operates it can distinguish thermal signatures through corrugated metal roofing by reading the differential heat conductance of what is directly below. The system was counting containers, confirming the thermal output from submarine battery charging equipment, building the positive identification profile that weapons release authorization requires. The Su-30S were inbound. The RQ-180 needed to hold sensor position to complete the PID lock and receive release authorization. Stable sensor line of sight, no evasive maneuvering, closed time window. The authorization came through at 0214. The AGM-114R9X is a Hellfire variant that has had its explosive warhead replaced with a kinetic energy package, a weighted penetrator surrounded by 6 fold-out blades that deploy in the terminal phase of flight, extending radially outward from the body just before impact. No explosive filler of significance. The weapon kills through mass, velocity, and blade geometry rather than blast overpressure, which means its destructive effect is confined to within a few feet of the impact point. A building 200 meters away does not feel an AGM-114R9X strike. The target does. Both weapons released. The countdown to impact ran in seconds. The first blade package punched through the corrugated metal roof and into the chemical precursor storage section. The second impacted the lithium battery warehouse serving the submarine construction area. Neither weapon carried enough explosive material to produce the fireball that followed. The cartel's own stored materials did that. Industrial chemical precursors under pressure, battery banks under charge, reacting to sudden structural breach in an enclosed space. The fireball was green and purple, the color signature of chemical combustion, not conventional explosive detonation. The facility's own inventory became the munition. The Su-30 pilots saw it from altitude as they crossed the coast. They were 58 seconds behind the attack. The RQ-180 was already aggressing back toward the water, descending again to sea clutter altitude, running dark, heading northeast. The University of Zulia campus, 200 meters from the warehouse complex, was undamaged. The church, whose windows had no view of what happened that night, remained structurally intact. The precision margin of the R9X, the reason it exists as a weapon type, had confined the destruction to the target geometry while leaving the surrounding area physically untouched. On the water, the maritime component of the operation had been running simultaneously. The cartel's semi-submersible submarines, spooked by the electronic ghost formation the Growlers had projected, had broken from the harbor and run toward open water. A Venezuelan Lupo-class guided frigate cut across the surface at speed, fire control radars active, its 76mm gun mount trained toward international waters. The captain's calculation was that no American commander would fire on a warship flying a sovereign flag in international waters, that the threat of an overt act of war was a shield the U.S. would not push through. The USS Gerald R. Ford executed a hard turn, bringing her bow to bear on the Venezuelan vessel's bearing. The AN/SPY-6 radar activated at full operational power. No transmission on any frequency, no voice communication, no explicit threat. What appeared on the Venezuelan frigate's electronic warfare display was a fire control lock, the specific frequency and pulse pattern of a radar system that has completed a targeting solution and is maintaining track. The Aegis combat management system aboard the Ford had computed engagement parameters for the frigate without anyone authorizing their use. The display was showing the Venezuelan captain what existed, not what was being threatened. The distinction is not one that matters much at close quarters with a carrier battle group. The Venezuelan captain read the display, understood what the radar lock represented in terms of what was positioned behind it, and ordered his ship to reduce speed. The semi-submersibles scattered without their escort. The maritime surface was cleared without a shot fired or a word spoken on any radio frequency. By 0300, the Ford had resumed her normal patrol heading. The RQ-180 was crossing back into international airspace below radar coverage. Pentagon Public Affairs had prepared no statement. When Venezuelan state media began reporting the warehouse fire as an industrial accident caused by improper chemical storage procedures, no American official contradicted them. Washington's position was silence. The strategic accounting of that silence is where the operation's real dimensions become visible. The United States removed $950 million in narco-logistics infrastructure from the operational capacity of the Cartel of the Suns, the criminal network operating under Venezuelan state protection, whose revenue streams fund a significant portion of the Maduro government's parallel economy. No American personnel were placed at physical risk in Venezuela. No formal act of war was committed. No diplomatic incident that required a response was created. The S-300VM air defense network that Russia had sold to Venezuela as a deterrent against exactly this kind of operation had been neutralized not by a faster missile or a more powerful jammer, but by a spoofing operation that cost the Growlers a few hours of flight time to execute and pointed the defense system's own response protocols against itself. Russia's air defense export program makes a specific implicit promise to its customers that the S-300 series creates a denied access zone that Western air power cannot penetrate without absorbing catastrophic losses. The Zulia operation produced evidence that the promise has a boundary condition. The S-300 responds to what its radar shows it. When the radar is showing it a fabricated picture, the system's response is precisely as sophisticated and useless as its programming. The hardware performed correctly. The picture it was operating on was false. The RQ-180's existence as an operational platform, never officially confirmed, never formally acknowledged, is the structural answer to the denied airspace doctrine that Russia has been selling since the S-300 series entered the export market. A radar that cannot acquire a contact cannot generate a targeting solution, regardless of how many missiles it controls. The stealth architecture does not defeat the missile. It defeats the process that gets to the missile. And the R9X exists because precision at this level, the kind that destroys a target while leaving a church 200 meters away with intact windows, changes the political calculus of covert action in ways that conventional munitions cannot. When the strike evidence is a thermal fire consistent with industrial accident rather than a crater consistent with air-delivered munitions, the attribution question remains genuinely open. Washington does not need to claim credit. It does not need to deny involvement. It simply does not comment, and Venezuela cannot produce evidence that contradicts the industrial accident narrative without simultaneously acknowledging that a classified American aircraft penetrated their most protected airspace undetected. The silence is the message. The message is, we were there, we did this. You cannot prove it, and we can do it again. That is what $950 million in cartel infrastructure burning on Christmas morning actually communicated to the governments watching it happen. Not that the United States chose to strike, that it chose to strike this way. Invisible, attributable only to physics, leaving the target country with no escalation pathway that does not require admitting their air defense failed. If this breakdown gave you a clear picture of how covert precision operations work in the modern era, subscribe and share it. More of these analyses keep coming as long as you are here for them.